5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to this week's edition of the EUVC Lowdown, the show that wraps up the week in European venture with some of the key people making the headlines. Today, we're gonna cover Frontlines, What Founders Want survey, 500 Emerging Europe's Emerging Talent Thesis, TNW's article on how cybercrime is causing the global maritime industry to drown, Dan Bauer's great post on the conundrum of falling in and out of love with your startup, and finally João Nunes' article on VC 2.0 and the revolution of machine learning and data-driven VCs. Hannah, first of all, welcome to the show and thank you so much for joining us to unpack the results of your survey, What Founders Want.
Thanks for having me.
You're the marketing associate at Frontline Ventures, and I'd love for you to just tell us a bit about why you thought we needed this survey on what founders need, and then after that, go ahead and unpack the results, and then everyone will be able to chime in and say whatever we think.
Sure. So we actually conducted the survey to help with internal processes around Frontline's own platform offering, and then as a byproduct, also publish the results for everyone else to see. So back in May and June of this year, we surveyed a little over 206 pre-seed and seed founders from all over the place to find out what they look for in VCs and evaluate our own platform offering. So we asked them about any past experience they had raising VC at a previous company, the location and investment raised to date at their current startup, and then the gender breakdown of their current founding team. We then went ahead and presented them with 14 factors that might influence their choice between two VC funds and asked them to pick their top three, and that was in no particular order. So all the percentages and rankings in the report are based on the number of participants that picked a certain factor in their top three. And I'm so sorry that I'm now going to ruin the word factor for you because I'm going to say it so much. Now, our vision at Frontline is to make capital the least valuable part of our offering. So we excluded deal terms and valuation from the options and just focused on value add aspects. So I'll take you through some of our key findings. So over half of respondents, 53%, picked the fund's understanding of their sector and business as one of their top three factors. It's common positive feedback investors might hear from founders is, oh, you really get the business. So not surprising that ranked highly. Second was personal relationships and chemistry with the deal lead, which came in at 34%. Frontline team was kind of surprised this didn't rank first. I sat down with the seed investment team after analysing all the results, all of the data, and asked them to predict what the ranking would be. And all five thought that this would come out on top, just because it's such an important factor for early stage founders. They're going to spend a lot of time with their first investors, so establishing trust is kind of a big deal. But we were even more surprised at what ranked third, and a very close third at that, so it came in at 33%, which was introductions to prospective customers. So everyone knows how important those early customers are. They add credibility to the company, they get money through the door, they can provide product feedback, and always great to have warm introductions. But the consensus amongst our team was that investors shouldn't want to be a major acquisition channel for their startups. If there's a problem there, if they can't get in front of their own prospects, that might indicate that there's a problem in the value proposition, in the marketing materials, and introing potential clients kind of just slaps a plaster on those problems.
I was about to say, it's funny, Hannah, because saying that I see three heads popping saying, yeah, absolutely, we agree on that. I'd love to dive deeper on that in just a second.
One of the factors that came out a little lower than expected was positive references from other founders. So our team predicted that would come out in third or fourth place. It actually came out in seventh place in the survey, so only 22% selected it. For a seed fund, kind of blind character references are basically the single most important piece of due diligence on a new opportunity. Young startups won't have that much traction and won't have loads of financials to look through, so a lot lies on those character references. Those that have been involved with securing VC in the past at a previous company did put it as a more important factor. 27% of them selected it versus 19% of those that hadn't raised VC before. But overall, still a lot lower than what we guessed it would be.
Interesting. David, I see that you've marked that you want something to say, so tell us, what are you saying here?
Yeah, first of all, Hannah, thank you for joining us. Super short notice, super cool to have you. I'd love to ask two questions. One is, can you shed some light on geos? Just first to understand, is this super UK skewed? Is it super pan-European, just so you understand? And then the follow-up question that I'd love to ask is actually both of our dear GPs that are here present, so Enes and Dan. I'd love to hear if anything that Hannah said kind of made you go, what the fuck? Or if everything was like, that seems reasonable. But Hannah, I'd love to hear you first.
Yeah, so we sent a survey out to any pre-seed and seed founder across the globe. Because of our networks as a fund, it came out as 44% from the UK, 25% from Ireland, 17% continental Europe, and then the rest kind of around the world. So 9% in America, so mostly Europe, little bit in America, and then a couple of people from Asia.
Dan, I'd love for you to comment on what David just said.
I'm old, I'm cynical, and I'm a bit of a misery sometimes. And I always worry about statistics and damn statistics, or whatever that ridiculous quote is. So I'm kind of intrigued as to the validity, and I'm not undermining any of the work, because I think it's amazing that you're doing this and founders can then see the
My
feedback.
survey, Dan.
No, but tell me, what do you think? What do you think is the reality around? I mean, at base, it's give me the money and get out of my hair, right? So just give me the money and let me get on with my business. That's the base, I think, of most founding teams. And I always think that anything, and I'm a value add investor, so I'm one of those pains in the asses for most founders. So I wonder what your genuine, honest take is of not the validity, but the honesty or the accuracy. What do you think the numbers should be, or what do you think the real salient points are, or what do you think that's missed or they didn't tell you?
Interesting. What do I think they didn't tell me?
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe there isn't. Listen, maybe I'm looking for something there isn't there. I always wonder it from the baseline, having been a founder for 25 years and raised millions and deployed millions. I always think, just give me the money and just get out of the fucking way. And then I always worry from the baseline.
I mean, we should have had that as an option.
So that's just rounding off the circle. That's my miserable, cynical, middle-aged man view. But maybe there isn't. Maybe I'm fishing for something there isn't there. So feel free to punch me in the face.
And as I have to call on you because you're one of the GPs here. I'm sure that you have perspectives. You've been laughing at what Dan has said, and I think I also saw some nodding. So I don't think you entirely disagree. I think you actually laugh because you think that he's just putting it very provocatively, but also correctly.
Yeah, I think this is a fun conversation. But going to statistics and what a survey says or it doesn't, I think our job is more of an art than science. And the moment it becomes science, I'm out. I don't like the science portion of things. I like the art part of things. I think inventions are more of an art, and then building a factory is science. So I think agreeing on what Dan said, I like these intuitive outputs, and what the top tier founders are saying anecdotally, I think has much more weight than statistics, which is much more of a science. So I don't like the data-driven thing in our business. The moment it becomes data-driven, someone else can do it, I'm out. But about portfolio support, I think the biggest support that a fund can give is the brand signal, and that goes above all else. Any portfolio support that you would give would be lower than a brand signal that you can provide as a VC fund. Going back to basics from a defensible moat perspective, a VC has zero moat apart from the brand. There's no network effect, there's no economies of scale, there's no coordinated resources. It's only the brand that matters. And I feel like, this may come out unfortunate, but portfolio support is something you give to strengthen the brand, not to actually help the portfolio companies, because a great founder doesn't need your support in anything except for downstream capital. Maybe the only part where you can add value, where you might know better than the founder, might be access to VCs, because that's what you do on a daily basis. But apart from that, a good founder doesn't need your support anyway, so you end up trying to support the not well-performing portfolio companies, which is unproductive on both sides. I feel like, you shouldn't be doing that. So I think I'm on Dan's side on this, where we do a lot of portfolio support. We try to do access to downstream capital, support with fundraising. We have a talent team so that we can help our founders source talent. But none of these are things that the founders won't be able to do without us. It's just that we are trying to be part of their journey, which would strengthen our brand, which would in return strengthen our deal flow. So I think everything ties back to brand, and portfolio support is one of the things that just ties back to it.
And let me quickly chime in on the art versus science part of things, because being a boring journalist, I try to I like nice definitions. So honestly, my idea here is that VC is neither. It's not art and it's not science. I really look at it as a craft, honestly. So there is part of it that is kind of an art. So there is something that you can add from your own individuality, but also there is a lot from just like a normal scientific structural organization to it. So I would say VC is a craft. Would you agree?
Again, like taking to the macro and looking at it as on a spectrum, I think hedge fund investing or public investing is much more of a science. You have all the data in the world. Everyone has access to every single stock. You just have to pick the right ones, which becomes more of a scientific approach rather than an artsy intuitive approach. On that spectrum, on VC, especially on early stage, I don't want to put VC as one category because there's pre-seed, seed, all the way until maybe Series C, D, E. But on early stage, there is access asymmetry and there's information asymmetry. And that's where it becomes art than science. Obviously, as you go to the later stages, first, information asymmetry kind of dilutes. Everyone has information about every company in that whole region that they have. They can get signals, they can look at different job positions, etc. So information asymmetry fades away. Access asymmetry stays, which is why brand is important. But after Series C and beyond, I think even access asymmetry fades away and just becomes a pricing game almost, which is much more similar to public markets. So on that spectrum of like public market investing versus pre-seed founder-led investing, I think on the right you have more of science, on the left you have more of an art, and pre-seed is there. I think craftsmanship would be more like Series A and B, which is down the line on the spectrum you move towards right, and then it becomes more of a hybrid of the two.
Fair enough.
I could have this conversation go on and on for for the rest of this show, but I think we have to go on to the next point, and that is actually also going to be a monologue by Enes Hulli, because Enes, you are the GP of 500 Emerging Europe, and I want us to just dive into your thesis on emerging talent. Tell us, first of all, why did you rebrand 500 Istanbul to 500 Emerging Europe? And then give us a rundown on your thesis around emerging talent.
Dude, this is going to take like 5 minutes straight, me talking, doing a monologue. Do you actually want that?
We love your monotonous Istanbulian accent, so please go on and take us through it.
All right. Going back to 2016, when we first raised 500 Istanbul, it was a $10 million vehicle that we only focused on Turkey. And back then there was a coup attempt in Turkey. We raised the fund a week after the coup attempt. And because of that, we said from the start, hey, you know what? We're only going to invest into global businesses. So businesses that generate revenue from the Western world from the start. And our whole thesis has been around that. Now we have 30 active portfolio companies generating $600 million annual revenue. Only 3% comes from Turkey. Portfolio raised $1.1 billion, and 99% of that came from US investors. So we're doing a big value chain drift. And when you look around the world, where else is there this value chain drift? You can pinpoint different smaller countries like Israel or Estonia, but there is no one big region that actually executes on that value chain drift. If you look into typical emerging market investing like Latin America, Middle East, Africa, Southeast Asia, they actually invest into companies in that value chain, meaning the team is there, the revenue is from there, the investors are there, even all the way until the exit, the company rides on that local or regional value chain. And the unicorns from those regions are also, their defensible moat is the fact that they're local. They're more hyper-local companies that become unicorns in Africa, in MENA, in Southeast Asia, in LATAM. Not the case with Central Eastern Europe. Out of the 32 unicorns that exist in the region, 31 of them are fully global companies, meaning what they do is they actually generate revenue from the Western world or from more mature technology markets from the start. They raise their Series A's, B's, C's from UK or US investors, and down the line they exit or they do an IPO in these Western public markets as well. So you only bet on the talent that's based in Central Eastern Europe, but then all else is either fully global or tailored towards the US/the UK, which positions Central Eastern Europe as very different than all of the other emerging markets. So this is not your typical emerging market investment thesis. That's why we call this the emerging talent investing thesis, where we're only investing in the talent that's in these 20 countries in our geography, but nothing else. In a sense, you're almost hedging all these geopolitical or economic issues that the region has, because your cost base is in the region, whereas your revenue, your fundraising, your exit, etc., is mostly in the US and somewhat in Western Europe/the UK. That's been our thesis, and seeing that it went well with Fund 1 in Turkey, we wanted to replicate that in Southeast Europe. So we tested out Bulgaria, Greece, Ukraine, Romania, Hungary with Fund 1. With Fund 2, now that we have a 70 million euro vehicle and we're doubling down on Central Eastern Europe, the name 500 Istanbul wasn't helping us, unfortunately. We needed a broader name that would encapsulate better what we're trying to achieve, hence Emerging Europe. And the reason why we call this the Emerging Europe thesis is, A, we believe the talent here is emerging, and B, there's a stagnating portion of Europe and there's an emerging portion of Europe. And I think it's easy to make that distinction these days.
Yeah, and I won't ask Dan to comment on the stagnating parts of Europe. Him sitting in London right now, I think he's reading the news with a dear Miss Tuss, who's doing all her best to make emerging Europe look much better than stagnating Europe. Let's get on to the next point. Enes, do you want a final remark?
No, I was going to say is UK part of Europe. I feel like UK now became a state in the US, was what I was going to say.
I'm sorry. I used to have to apologize for going on holiday just for being English in a foreign country. Now I have to apologize just for being English everywhere. So yeah, I'm
Okay, so we just had a bit of a commercial break. You guys didn't know that, but of course I plugged Enes in because we're investing into 500 Emerging Europe. And what can a guy do when he has someone he loves and wants everyone else to love as well? So Enes, thanks so much for joining us. Andrew, you're up next. You're head of media at TNW. So I want to dive into your article on maritime industry drowning from cyber criminal threats. And the backstory, of course, is that ship owners used to only in the good old days have to worry about pirates coming on board with ships and cutlasses. But now it seems to have taken a quite new playing field. Would you take us through it, Andrew?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Andrew. I'm the head of media at TNW. The story that I'm talking about is actually, I did not write it, because being a head of media, when you become an editor, you become, you stop being a writer in many cases. So I'm here to promote a great story
Kate Dowley or something like that has written it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. GPT-3 right there. No, it's my great colleague Kate Lawrence, who has been writing about all types of mobility for so many years, and now she has taken a deep dive into the maritime industry, and this is part of the transformation that we are having here at TNW. We used to be a very consumer tech and global focused publication. Now we are turning towards the European technology innovation ecosystem, and we are writing about technology for basically all the startups, all the founders, all the public sector, all the corporate innovation people all out there. And this is one of the first pieces coming out of the new TNW, as I try to call it usually. So here is the story. What I really like talking about and writing about is industries that are not very well covered by the media. So there is not much being reported about cybersecurity when applied to the maritime industry, while it turns out that this space is actually incredibly important and incredibly underserved, it seems, by all sorts of cybersecurity startups and cybersecurity innovation. So what we have here is we have two sides, right? We have our ports on one hand, and we have our ships on the other hand. In both cases, both of them are struggling to keep up with cyber criminals, but for very different reasons. For ports, what you've got is that there is a whole lot of legacy systems which are not being updated in time, and sometimes you just don't even know anymore what everything is doing, what everything is there for. And then with ships, it's even more interesting because, for example, cargo ships, they only spend very, very short time in ports while they're being loaded and unloaded, and that means that they cannot really, there can't be a really good upgrades of either hardware security or software security. They only dry docked every 3 years. So imagine if you only could upgrade, seriously upgrade your security infrastructure every 3 years. So this is what was happening with cargo ships, for example, and there are very interesting examples in the story. So what you've got is, of course, ransomware. There is a lot of ransomware attacks that hit ports. We know about a bunch of them. We don't know about even more of them, because very often these attacks go unreported, both on ports and on ships, because they just pay up and get their data back, hopefully, and then this is about it. But what's really important here is that during the ransomware attacks, there is a very, very big chance that some data, some important data, actually gets stolen. And then if the attack is not reported, then most probably you don't even know what sort of data, what sort of sensitive data can get stolen. And ransomware attacks came to very big players. For example, AP Moller-Maersk was hit by an attack some time ago. They had to reinstall all the software on 45,000 PCs and 4,000 servers after that, literally reinstall everything. So it is a huge thing. And on a ship, it's even worse. Ransomware is one thing, but you can also hack into a loading system, and then you can just shift a little bit, shift how the loading is done, and then it could lead to a ship actually snap, literally snap on en route somewhere in the open seas. So there is a whole lot of stuff like that, and the problem is that there isn't much being done. So there are two initiatives, one in Valencia on the port side, where they have created this Port 4.0, I think it's called. Valencia also, this marina in Valencia, actually, La Marina is called. It is also the site of our conference in March, and they have created there a whole new infrastructure that is now being tested, and I suppose that they can translate it to other port ecosystems. And on the other hand, in the UK, Kate talked to a university in Plymouth, which has created a cybersecurity test bed, and again, they are also trying to get things working. But what's more actionable, by the way, for startups, I think here is that there are coming two unified requirements, it's called in the law type of jargon. So there's going to be a bit more regulation in regards to what kind of cybersecurity measures have to be taken by both ports and ships. And this is, I think, where cybersecurity startups can come in and work with this maritime industry part to actually create better security. So there's going to be more demand on this. So if you are anywhere around this topic, I would really recommend look into it. That's the end of my monologue.
Thanks a million, Andrew. And I think that right now is the right time for any startups to be playing in this game, because the shipping industry has never made more money than they do right now. I think A.P. Moller-Maersk, the Danish company, came out with I think almost the same profit numbers as they had revenues last year. So it is an amazing time to be a shipping company. It's ridiculous. So now I want to turn on the heat with Dan Bauer, GP of Superseed, and talk about falling in love. So Dan, tell us about what why is it that we should talk about falling in love, and why is it's even more important maybe to be talking about falling out of love? Take us through it.
It was a mind hack that I was taught about 25 years ago by a business coach. And it's something that I share with my founders because it's something that I assume, and I would expect most people on this call to have experienced. When you first start your first startup, it's ridiculously exciting. It tends to be driven by the content of the business, not the business of doing business or learning how to build a startup. But it's, you want to change the world, you want to solve climate change, you want to save all the babies, you want to do whatever it is that your startup is doing. It's not always the case, but it tends to be that emotive driver. And what tends to happen in year two or towards year two is that you fall off a cliff. So as a founder entrepreneur, and people will have either heard or experienced that it's really bloody hard. And you think on one hand, oh, I'm starting my own business, I'm going to be my own boss, I'm going to control my own hours, when really it's the opposite. You've got more bosses, you're under more pressure, you have less time, and it's a soul swallowing misery fest, and it's quite isolating and quite lonely. So you sometimes, for many founders, they go on this trajectory which is just, and you can see the lights switching off, and you can see the sparkle in the eyes diminish as they're pounding against and not moving very far. So the mind hack, to come back, apologies if I'm going on a bit, but the mind hack is a reframe. It's a mental reframe about falling in love with business. So it's about falling out of love with the content of your business and falling in love with the business of doing business. And there are several ways that I share with founders about how to practically do this. And if you do it, it takes a bit of time and it takes a bit of effort and it takes a little bit of a mental reframe, but falling in love with learning how to be an incredible leader, an incredible business person, an incredible, I don't know, marketing budget, whatever the skills are that are missing. It's quite a simple mind hack in principle, but falling in love with the business of doing business is a really powerful reframe for many entrepreneurs who are struggling as they start hitting those brick walls, which tends to happen in 18 months, 2 years, and that misery sets in. So for the seed and the early stage investors and early stage founders, I'm sure that resonates. And
I'm very sorry for anyone that was hoping that Dan would turn on the music and not be Mr. Professional, but just be Mr. Sexy. That was not what we got here. So let's get on to the next topic, which is Sean Nunes. I want to talk to you about the article that you've written called VC 2.0 and the revolution of machine learning and data-driven VCs. You've done quite some research to create the article, so do tell us, Joao, how did you go about writing this? What were your core findings, and just what has been the reception?
Yeah, definitely. I think that the first point is great because Enes has already mentioned it, right? So this whole spectrum of science and art is really what we're dabbling here, right? And so as we go later stage up to the part of the hedge funds where it's pretty much just data and no art at all, and then you come into early stage, which is the actual opposite. And so I think that for me, writing the article wasn't really about writing the article, it was just pretty much super interested in this topic. I've spoken to lots of the teams in Europe, especially, that are really building algorithms in this space and that are crafting innovation in this space. And I just said, okay, wait a minute. There's so much information here. 99% of it, these funds haven't even said it publicly. Why not just make an article where we're able to actually express this and as well bridge the gap that I was finding, which is there's lots of super geeky machine learning content out there, and there's lots of VC content out there, but there's nothing really in the middle that allows people who not necessarily understand machine learning, but would love to see the impact of it in VC. And so that's pretty much where we started. And I think that there's really a couple of key points that I was able to find out. And so one of them, for example, is how there's so little information, right? Because everything is private, as Enes was mentioning as well, right? So it starts with being a data problem, which is not very good for a machine learning model, as everybody knows, right? And so there's really just 2 to 3 data sources that everybody uses. Everybody uses the Crunchbases of the world, if you have cash to afford it, the PitchBooks of the world, and all of those different data sources, but they're really just coming down from the same data set, right? And so pretty much there's so many VC investment and post-investment processes that can be affected by machine learning and AI, but really just a few of them are really being completely leveraged. So you could use it for deal sourcing, you could use it for deal screening, due diligence, really post-investment tracking of portfolio companies, loads of different things. But what I've seen the most is that actually most funds tend to only leverage these technologies from a deal sourcing perspective. And so this happens really because this is the area where it's easier to be developing a data-driven approach, right? It's kind of a deal sourcing is the low-hanging fruit as we would see in this funnel of investment, right? And it's the area where it's been proven where there's not really any possible disbenefits of applying machine learning because you're just increasing your top of the funnel and you're not really changing something. What you're doing is just making sure that you're seeing more opportunities. Whereas opposed when you start to use machine learning to decide, you're actually inputting that part into the investment process, right? And so lots of different funds focus on this low-hanging fruit part. And there's great studies that have been done in that perspective. So for example, like some researchers in St. Gallen ended up doing an algorithm that was pitting against each other, a group of business angels that were looking at, I think, 300 companies. And they gave also a model, the data on Crunchbase, to train it as well and become a professional investor. They asked the model to take decisions on 10 companies if they were good investments or not. What they've actually seen is the IRR is much greater in the fund, in the algorithm than it was for the actual business angels. So there's lots of different applications here, and there's lots of different funds that are providing insights here. So spoke with Notion, spoke with Boulderton, Early Bird. All of these guys are having great approaches, especially started by EQT with their mother brain, as we've all seen what has happened. But I think that the key point here to conclude as well is how much, at least in my view, and this is always a personal view that everybody can input into the game, there's never going to be a world, especially in early stage, where you delegate the investment decision completely towards a machine learning model. It is much rather the approach of kind of augmenting the investment process, where you're bringing the machine learning models to actually help you in making the decision or increasing the information that you have to make that decision. So, yeah.
Go, Enes. I can see that you want something to say here, so put it out.
Small remark. I feel like on the early stage, it's very easy to pick. Like even if you get a proper person who just graduated from university, give me 10 deals, give him or her 10 deals. I think like he or she might outperform me easily. Not outperform, but like pick the right ones easily. You know, it's less of a picking game. It's more of an access problem where if you have access to every single pre-seed founder in London, for example, it's easy to pinpoint which ones are top quartile or top decile. You don't have to be Einstein to do that, but the problem is you don't have access to the best 10% sometimes, and then you end up choosing from the lower 90%, and then obviously it impacts your returns a lot. So my question was going to be like on this data-driven decision-making process, are there any touch points to sourcing as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think that the biggest difference here is really that access problem that we've all seen, right? Because it's a game of access and not really you being a better investor than the other most of the times, right? It's much more of are you exposed to the great founders as opposed to another fund, right? And I think that has been the biggest point here, which is you apply this perspective and it's going to show you so many different companies that you would never even find, right? From this deal sourcing perspective. And I've seen this, for example, during the time that I was at Techstars as well. I was investing in Europe, Middle East, and Africa, even though I was based in Lisbon. So there's definitely that startup in Lithuania that I would never have found out if it wasn't for this sourcing perspective, right? So I think that these mechanisms lots of times really bring to light these founders that might be more hidden, or that you might not access them in another way, right? This doesn't mean that you're going to have the ability to access them. It's going to mean that you're going to have the ability to know that they're there to go after them, right? So yeah, I think they're definitely a good impact.
Beautiful. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. And to our dear audience listening in, make sure to tune in for our newsletter on EUVC, EU.VC, as well as on LinkedIn, where we will continue the conversation and also post the latest funds that have raised and our Who's Hiring section, together with a whole bunch of GIFs, memes, and emojis. We promise we'll try and entertain you as much as we can. See you next week.